Welcome to Living Grounded, Village's weekly Q&A, where you can ask anonymous questions about God, the Bible, life with Jesus, and all things in between. Hello, welcome to Living Grounded. This is episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about ghosts, the fall, God using evil in the fulfillment of prophecy, and what might a day in heaven look like. I'm Ella, this is Tim.
Hello.
If you weren't there on Sunday, we dug into Matthew 3, looking at what is the kingdom of heaven and how do we enter it. If you weren't there, you can check that out on the Village app. Let's get started.
Okay.
First question we got come through is, if there is no in-between after death, as you pointed out in Hebrews 9:27, and we talked about that a few weeks back.
Yep.
Man is destined to die once, and after that to face judgment. Then how come people see ghosts?
Yeah. Have you ever seen a ghost, Al?
I remember thinking that I had.
Oh, yeah, all right. You've got to the heart of the problem.
Yeah.
The heart of the problem. So I guess, let's just agree with the premise. Yeah, I think to just reiterate from a living grounded earlier, I think when you die, you go straight to heaven with God until the new creation. There is no in between realm. There's no purgatory, and there's no. I guess when people think about ghosts, they think about you're left here on a human soul left here on earth, wandering soul kind of thing. I don't think that's what's going on there. So there's two options, and I'll let you know which one I'm probably prone to. So one option is that ghosts are just purely a figment of human imagination, a trick of the mind, trick of the eye, so on. The other option is that they're demons. Some of them could be angels, but I'd be more inclined to go demons. And it is interesting, some commentators would suggest that the language that you see, the word you see in particularly the New Testament in the time of Jesus and so on, when Jesus is casting out demons and all this sort of stuff, is you could actually translate that word, instead of demon, you could translate it to ghost. Now, there's that's not 100%. There's a question mark there. But that would be my sense, that if there are ghosts, if what people claim to be seeing are not tricks of the mind, then it would be kind of demonic activity. And I guess, depending on where your background listening today, you might either be nodding along going, yeah, that's what I reckon too, or you might be going, nah, there's no such thing at all. Look, all I can say is I would just be very hesitant to write off everything as having to be of the natural material world. To do that is to write off the Bible, essentially. The Bible says that there is a supernatural world that engages in the natural world, and that takes the form of sometimes demonic activity. And don't know what that always looks like, can't always be sure of it today, but I would be personally very hesitant to say that's not happening in some form right now in places around the world, and lots of people testify to an eyewitness account of some sort of that. So so that's what I would say. It's not a human soul. It's probably demonic activity.
What if people think they've seen a relative that's died?
Yeah, well, I guess the question is then, are we to say it's impossible for a demon to take that sort of form? That I don't think that's outside of the realms of possibility, is it? Yeah. Look, there's one case in the Bible where people call Samuel back from the dead, essentially. But it's tricky. It's in the Old Testament. It's very hard to unpack and know exactly what's going on there. But I would be very hesitant to say that we are able to, and Samuel was a very particular guy. I'd say I'd be very hesitant to say that you can call on your ancestor or something like that and bring them down from wherever they are. I think that I don't think we've got solid ground for that necessarily.
That's good. Another question is from Sunday in the sermon. You sort of connected a Pharisee to modern day evangelical in America.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of?
Look, I don't really want to, because I don't want to claim to know the hearts of every person. It's just more speaking in generalizations, and there are times I think where we need to speak in generalizations. I think generally speaking, there is a more political than Christian person that we often see portrayed over in the American evangelical scene that seems very strong on, I guess, similar to a Pharisee, very strong on a legalistic form of morality rather than a compassionate and loving form of honouring the holiness of God. And that there's some of the distinction. It's a person who loves legalism and oppressing others through legalism, as opposed to honouring the holiness of God in love. Now that's a very hard thing to pick out, and again, what's going on in the actual heart, how much is done through ignorance, how much is done through actual hard-heartedness and sinfulness. Yeah, I want to be very careful there. So, look, sorry, but I think I'm going to leave the answer at that. Yeah, rather than, hey, here's a list of names you can go and look up. Sorry.
Yeah. Our another question is, if sin creates a broken world, does that mean the animal kingdom is part of that brokenness? For example, killer whales, hunt and murder for recreational purposes.
Yeah.
Are they pure and innocent no matter how they live, or are they sinful, corrupted by sin maybe?
Yeah, and what does it say about us when we watch that on a documentary and go, that's awesome? Do you not?
No.
Oh, right, sorry. Just me, I guess. Anyway, so, again, a little bit similar to the demon thing. I would be hesitant to say I could know for sure. I wasn't there in the gut. I don't know what killer whales were like before sin entered the world. I can't say. Here's one thing I think we can say for sure. Yes, some animal behaviour, I think, has been affected by the fall. So let me give you an example of this. A rabid dog. Now that dog may have been not, entirely peaceable outside of getting this disease, rabies, and so then has turned it, essentially to turning it to doing evil. Again, we're talking about animals. I'd be very hesitant to talk about motive because I don't think animals have motive the way that humans do, but certainly in terms of result. How many of the animal attacks and things, so less about the killer whale thing, but more about other animal things, are because they're in pain from sickness or, reacting in fear to something that perhaps in the idyllic sense of the Garden of Eden, there is no fear, so they wouldn't have reacted that way. That's probably the limit of where I'm like, there's something there. As to getting into more killer whale example, I guess all I would say is I don't know, but it makes some sense. Like it makes some sense that that animal behaviour is a result of the curse, that all creation was cursed. Animals come under that. That is why animals do get sick and die, and there's lots of problems, and they go extinct and all this sort of stuff. These things are all connected. It makes some sense to me that also some of their behaviours may have changed. Can't say, I'd be very hesitant to be drawn on specifics, but yeah, makes some sense. Why not?
Yeah, cool. Our second last question. There are a few moments in the passage from two Sundays ago, where certain events fulfilled Old Testament prophecy. Are we to understand that the fulfillment of prophecy is a way to help solidify that Jesus is the Messiah? And if so, looking back into the Old Testament, how do we reconcile killing of babies and children in order to fulfill prophecy?
So if people if you're keen to look this up, so you go to Matthew 2. Matthew 2, Herod, in response to the threat of Jesus, a king being born, him hearing a king being born, tries to snuff out that threat by killing all the babies in the region around Bethlehem, who are 2 and under. But Matthew links this. He says this is actually a fulfillment of a prophecy, I'm pretty sure by Jeremiah, but talking about essentially that there'll be a great lament in the land of Ramah. Essentially that there seems to be some connection between that happening and a prophecy that was made, hundreds of years earlier, about a terrible moment that's going to happen in the land, the killing of babies, essentially. So I think what we want to do just first is go, yes, Matthew is saying this is an indicator of that the time is here, that Jesus is Messiah, that the fulfillment of this prophecy is, yes, does solidify Jesus' position. It also, I think importantly, points to a sovereign God. How can a prophecy work? How do any of the prophecies work that either very lucky guesses or they are the words communicated from God to humanity, telling about the future, which requires a God who is outside of time and who knows the future and so on. And I would say, yes, that is the case. And I would also say that it is the case that God seems to be willing and able, or whatever language you want to use there, he seems to use evil situations or deeds for his own good. And the Bible doesn't shy away from this. The classic place to go is Genesis chapter 50, where Joseph, having been thrown into a pit by his brothers, ended up in Egypt and so on, only to become ruler of Egypt and actually saving his family that threw him into the pit. Eventually, he's, when they come to him all ashamed about this and fearful for their lives, he says, hey, what you meant for evil, God used for good. So here was this terrible evil thing, but it was actually part of God's plan for saving his people. And that seems to be an ongoing kind of pattern through the Bible. So what do we do with this? So on one level, we go, okay, there seems to be a problem. We have a problem with God foreknowing that Herod will murder babies and then using that for the sake of his plan. That's essentially what we're saying. God knew this was going to happen. How can he work that into his plan? Now, I think on one level we all need to go, and I think everyone can. God didn't murder the babies; Herod did. So on that level, okay, it's Herod's done it, but we still say God used it. Maybe we say something like this: God could have stopped it. Why didn't he stop it? And the answer is yes, he could have stopped it. But also you need to kind of broaden this, and you need to go, well, God could have stopped all of it. Human suffering could have been ended at the garden if God just went, okay, you sinned, that's it, sorry. Could have been ended at the flood, could have been ended any time. God could have stopped suffering. Now, why doesn't he? Well, he doesn't for the sake of his son and for the sake of his people. God, as his desire has been from the very beginning of creation to have a people for his son to spend eternity enjoying, glorifying, knowing him. And so God endures actually human suffering, allows human suffering for the sake of his ultimate purpose, which is people loving, enjoying him and glorifying him forever. There's a point you get to with this, I think. There's a moment you kind of got to get to where you have to decide, hearing all of that, whether we have the mental, the wisdom capacity and the ethical capacity to be able to go to God, I think that's wrong. I don't think that's a good thing that you've done. I think there is a way that you can quite happily reconcile. It's a tension that it is that that God is in control of all things, but that humans are ultimately responsible for their actions. So God can use a prophecy like this without being tainted by it, because it's Herod who's done the murdering. I think you can hold that. But lots of people find that tricky. And the question I think for them is, do you believe that you have the capacity in your humanness to grasp all the angles, to grasp the whole picture? Do you understand enough? Are you wise enough? Are you good enough to know that as you kind of judge God on this to a certain extent, that your judgment is right? You are judging from perfect ethical standards as opposed to maybe God having better ethical standards than you do. And I think that's the question we ultimately need to ask. It certainly seems like God is able to say that he is a good God and yet is able to do these things. And the question for us, I think, is going, could he be right? Maybe he could know that better and bigger than, he could see that bigger than me. Now, here, let me finish with this on this question. Here's why I think it's good news. Here's why it's good news that God can use even things like that prophecy to solidify Christ and a good thing happening there. It's good news because it means that evil doesn't win. It means that evil has an ultimate hope. It means that even my darkest deeds God can use for good. And I think there's some solace. I don't think that's like just trying to make us feel better. I think that is what the Bible says. I think that's what the Bible points to. And I think that is actually a hope that we should all carry and hold on to. That because God is sovereign and because he hasn't just ended it all, because he's willing in his grace and compassion to allow evil for the sake of good resulting, that it means that life isn't futile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, Tim. Last question is, what does glorifying God for eternity in heaven actually look like?
Oh, well, let me paint you a day in heaven. No, I can't. I'm sorry. Look, the Bible doesn't describe an actual living day in heaven, okay? It doesn't. But let me rattle off a bunch of things that it does say. First of all, I want to encourage people to move away from the language of heaven to the language of, and not that the person in this question has used that necessarily, but they kind of have. Anyway, let's use the language that the Bible uses, which is the new creation.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, the Bible does say kingdom of heaven and so on, but it doesn't mean a place in the clouds, whereas we kind of do, I think. Let's use the language of new creation. So, first of all, it's a new creation, which means it's like this creation, but new. All things new. All of it new. What continuity, discontinuity there, I don't know, but it will be like this creation, but better, newer. You get that from Isaiah 66, you get that from Revelation 21. Lots is going to come from Revelation 21 and 22, okay? In this new creation, God is there. In what exact forms, I would be hesitant to say, but certainly in the form of our Lord Jesus Christ in the flesh. Jesus in his resurrected body will be there. In fact, he's going to lead us into the new creation. Again, numerous passages, but Revelation 21. There will also be God's people. So we will be with all of God's people. It's pretty cool. Get to meet Moses, get to meet Elijah. I don't know who else you want to meet. Someone weird and random, you'll get to meet these guys. You'll get to meet believers from all tribes and tongues and nations from across the whole time spectrum. Wow, that'd be cool. There'll be no more sin or suffering. All of those things, all things made new. The curse will be undone. The curse will be reversed. So, that means that we don't glorify him necessarily in the same ways that we do now. So one of the ways that we glorify God now is by repenting. There will be no repentance in the new creation. There'll also be no endurance because there's no sin and suffering to endure. So how will we, in what ways will we? I'd suggest it's simply by enjoying him, enjoying knowing him, and enjoying his gifts in creation. we're going to have new bodies, enjoying what we can do with our new bodies in terms of, I don't know, like, I'll give you some examples in a moment, but singing seems to be involved. So, I don't know, in heaven, maybe in this creation, maybe this body that you've been given, your voice is pretty average, pretty rough. Maybe that is a result of the curse, I don't know.
Yeah, will we all be great singers?
Will we all be great singers in the heavens and the earth? Maybe. Either way, I take it that we'll all go, we'll get that voice is beautiful, whereas now we might go, God thinks that voice is beautiful. Yeah. Something along those lines. So there seems to be singing involved, but I don't think I buy into that, we'll essentially just be one great choir singing endless songs to God. I think that's being over literal about some of the things in Revelation particularly. And again, think about this being, you don't need a new creation for that. That's more the cloud in heaven sort of thinking, I reckon. A new creation points to, again, something like this. And how can that not be more wondrous, more beautiful, more mysterious and deep than this one? The wonders that we will get to explore and unpack in the new creation. I mean, it's going to keep us fascinated for eternity, I think, as well as, as we engage with God himself. Let me give you an example of this, I guess. Work seems to be a part of the human, an important part of human life. We need to work. We find joy through work. But because of sin, we also hate work. It weighs on us. We suffer because of work. In the new creation, I would be very surprised if we're not working, but working totally in joy, creating, producing, but in ways that don't feel like drudgery like today. Because there's no futility in the new creation, so it's not like, oh, well, this is just going to decay and die or something along those lines. So there's things there. Let me put it all together. I reckon my suggestion is the new creation looks like, and we'll glorify God by exploring and enjoying knowing him through just plain knowing him, but also through knowing him through his new creation, through his people, through his history of redemption, being able to look back and understand more deeply and understand better. Oh, look what you did in history, Lord, and how good it was, and so on. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be total satisfaction. Wonderful. How do we leave that?
Yeah, sounds pretty good. Thanks, Tim. Thank you guys for submitting your questions. It's fun to get a big mix of topics each week.
Yeah.
Anything else coming up this week?
No, just to let you know, if we didn't answer your question today as well, that they're banked up. We will get to them. We're really sorry. Sometimes we get more than we need. Other times we've gotten less, and that's when we'll pull some of these questions in. Other things to be aware of. Look, guys, we're really keen to lock people into church camp. So please, this Sunday, if you haven't already indicated, let us know that you're coming to church camp. You can do that, connection cards, and we'll let you know on Sunday how to do that. But also, I'll let you know on Sunday, but news about book clubs starting up. Would love to order those in the next week. So if you're keen to grow in your love and knowledge of God, if you're keen to grow deeper in your trust of Jesus and seeing how good he is and so on, read Desiring God with us. I'll tell you again on Sunday how to sign up for that.
Yeah, great. Have a great week. We'll see you Sunday.
Ciao.